Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Israel says 300 aid trucks entered Gaza since the blockade eased, but aid groups warn supplies are stalled at the border. As airstrikes intensify, Hamas says 6 aid guards were killed, highlighting chaos blocking relief to those most in need. Iran and the US resume high-stakes nuclear talks in Rome as deep divisions over uranium enrichment threaten a breakthrough. Tehran warns it will hold Washington accountable for any Israeli strike, while Trump pushes to prevent a regional arms race. Russia and Ukraine have launched a swap of 1,000 prisoners after their first direct talks in 3 years, though the deal doesn't include a ceasefire. Trump claims the exchange is complete, but Kiev and Moscow say it's still in progress, with the UAE again acting as a mediator. President Trump warns Apple to build iPhones in the US or face a 25% import tariff in a new push to boost domestic manufacturing. He made the demand in a post on Truth Social, saying Apple must pay up if it keeps producing abroad. As Lebanon heads to the local polls, Hezbollah pushes to prove its political strength despite heavy losses in last year's war with Israel. With weak construction aid tied to its disarmament, the group says any talks on giving up arms depend on an Israeli exit from South Lebanon. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accuses France, Britain and Canada of emboldening Hamas by threatening action over Israel's Gaza offensive. He says such pressure undercuts Israel's security, even as Western leaders insist Palestinian statehood doesn't mean support for Hamas. Chicago-born Elias Rodriguez is charged with first-degree murder after allegedly killing 2 Israeli embassy staff in Washington, D.C. in what officials call an anti-Semitic attack. Prosecutors say he opened fire outside a Jewish event attended by diplomats and young professionals. Homeland Chief Kristi Noem terminates Harvard student visa program, accusing the university of anti-Semitism and Chinese Communist Party ties. Harvard calls the move illegal and vows to defend its foreign students, as Noem warns other universities may be next. Our top story today, a Chicago-born man has been arrested as the lone suspect in the fatal shooting of 2 Israeli embassy employees. 31-year-old Rodriguez traveled to Washington from Chicago with a legally purchased gun in his checked baggage. He was in town to attend a work conference. On Wednesday evening, the American Jewish Committee hosted a mixer at the Capitol Jewish Museum, which the now deceased Yaron Lachinsky and Sarah Lynn Milgram were a part of. Soon after the event concluded, Metropolitan Police responded to reports of a shooting. Officers found Israeli embassy staffers had been shot. Forensic analysis revealed Rodriguez fired 21 bullets from a 9mm handgun, which he purchased legally in Illinois in 2020. In addition to 2 counts of first-degree murder, Rodriguez was charged in a 6-page criminal complaint with murder of foreign officials, causing death with a firearm and discharging a firearm in a crime of violence. Interim U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro said at a news briefing the complaint against Rodriguez constitutes a death penalty eligible case. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has strongly condemned the brutal killing of the 2 Israeli diplomats in the United States, describing it as a cold-blooded act. He also expressed gratitude for the US for standing by Israel during this difficult time. The White House also confirmed that the 2 leaders also discussed the killing over a phone call. We're now joined by Ambassador Daniel Cameron, who is the former ambassador of Israel to India. He's located in Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Daniel, for joining us. this situation has obviously developed very fast, this tragic situation. We now have a name, we now have some context to the attack. How do you interpret the motive? Given all we know, is this a classic lone wolf terror attack, or is it part of a wider anti-Semitic trend, do you think, Daniel?
Well, you might say that the act itself is a lone wolf, as you said, but it definitely does not come out of other contexts. This is a terrible tragedy, and you've described very well the developments in the past 48 hours. It's a tragedy, first of all, for the young couple, of very, very talented persons who were working at the embassy as staffers at the embassy in Washington, D.C., planning a life together. As a matter of fact, Yaron was supposed next week to propose to his girlfriend, his fiancée, to propose to her, and they were on their way to visit Israel, and all of a sudden, in 1 minute, in a terrible act of anti-Semitism and terrorism, which is a result of incitement, a result of incitement to violence, and the way from incitement to violence to terrorism and to taking a gun and killing two innocent people, the way is very short, and physically it was very short. They were a part of an evening at the Jewish Museum dedicated to young diplomats, and those two young diplomats in the beginning of their life, together, were killed in a second, and this is a tragedy, a terrible tragedy.
Ambassador Carmen, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced heightened security for Israeli diplomats worldwide. Are there any other immediate steps you think that the Israeli government should take? Do you think that it could be possible that there should have been heightened security in the first place in such a hotbed for the pro-Palestine movement?
Well, I don't think we can know exactly what exactly happened and brought it from the physical, tactical point of view. But I can tell you, as an ex-diplomat, that security and tightened security is part of the life of an Israeli diplomat. I was a diplomat for 45 years. I spent many years abroad at the service of the nation. As a matter of fact, I myself am a victim of terrorism in Argentina. In 1992, our embassy was blown up and destroyed, and unfortunately we lost many people, and I personally lost my wife during that terrible incident. So we have been living with this. Tightened security is very important, but I can tell you again that an Israeli diplomat and Israeli members of the embassy have security as part of their DNA.
Daniel, I'm going to ask something that critics might say now. They would say, some people are saying that Israel's policies at home is what's fueling this violence, this anti-Semitic violence abroad. I was just wondering what you think of that form of rhetoric.
Well, those who say so, I think they have a motive, and the motive is not to relay some reality. As you know, and we've been living with it for many years, terrorism has many faces, but at the end of the day, terrorism has a target. And I don't have to explain to an Indian audience what does it mean to be a victim of terrorism and what does it mean to prepare for the next attempt of terrorism. And, you know, as a code word, 2611 rings a bell worldwide and definitely in India. And terrorism against Israelis, and I must say, unfortunately, official Israelis who are symbols of the representation of Israelis abroad are and have been targeted. So linking this to internal Israeli democratic discussion is really complete nonsense.
Do you expect Washington to re-clarify this shooting as international terrorism, and how would that change cooperation with Israeli authorities?
I am totally confident that the cooperation was, is, and will continue to be a 100% cooperation. Whatever steps will be taken by the U.S. Authorities will be welcome, because we know the way the Americans investigate, prosecute, and bring people to justice. And you mentioned before that the murderer, the filthy murderer, was shouting "Free Palestine." Free Palestine is a slogan that became a license to kill. It happens in the US, it happens in campuses. It's so unfortunate that it's happening. I can tell you that a large majority of people who shout "Free Palestine" hardly know where Palestine is. And when they shout "From the river to the sea," you ask them what river and what sea, they don't exactly know what to tell you, but they know that they have to shout, and they know they're part of a campaign. Campaign is legit until it becomes violent, until it becomes a license to kill people. And unfortunately, in the last few years, and unfortunately in the US also, there are instances, there are campaigns, there are demonstrations that cross the line, and I am confident that the US authorities will deal with this as they should.
Ambassador Daniel Carman, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. We now move over to Europe, where the fifth round of critical nuclear talks between the US and Iran began today at 11 o'clock in Rome. A senior US official, Steve Witkoff, travelled to Italy for the negotiations as both sides sought to resolve long-standing issues over Iran's nuclear programme. Ahead of the talks, Iran issued a stern warning to both Israel and the United States, stating it would hold Washington accountable for any Israeli attack on its nuclear facilities. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi reiterated that the country was open to increased inspections of its nuclear sites, but would not compromise on its right to enrich uranium. Tehran pointed out fundamental differences with the US, particularly over uranium enrichment, which remained a major sticking point. The US had pushed for Iran to cease all enrichment, while Tehran insisted that it will not give up its enrichment rights. Meanwhile, the Israeli Prime Minister's office confirmed that US President Donald Trump agreed on the need to ensure Iran does not acquire nuclear weapons. As talks moved forward, it remained unclear whether these fundamental divides could be bridged. We're now joined by Ross Fineold, political risk analyst, to discuss this further. Thank you very much, Ross, for joining us. These talks have resumed after a 2-week pause. What, if anything, has shifted in the bargaining position since previous talks in Muscat, Oman? Ross, I believe you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. There's been some talk about how could Iran maintain a civilian nuclear power program without enriching uranium, perhaps under the direction or the presence of an international consortium. So there's been some talk about that, but the bottom line for the United States has not changed, which is Iran cannot have the ability to enrich uranium. And this really is a bottom line, and the Iranians are going to have to come around to that reality if there's going to be a deal.
Ross, when people hear that statement, enriching uranium for peaceful purposes, they might have some questions. I was wondering if you can explain that to them. How does one go about enriching uranium peacefully and not for nuclear weapons?
Well, from a technological perspective, frankly, it's a lot easier and faster to enrich for civilian nuclear power. Enriching uranium so that it could actually work in a nuclear weapon is a much more longer and difficult process. But what the concern for the United States and Israel is that Iran really already has the ability, if they wanted to enrich uranium so that it could be used in nuclear weapons. And again, this would cross the bottom line for the United States and by extension for Israel. So there's really little doubt that Iran has the capability to enrich uranium for use in nuclear weapons, no matter what they say. I mean, they could say over and over again that they only want to enrich for civilian nuclear power purposes, but there's really no doubt that they have the knowledge to enrich uranium so that it's sufficient to be used in nuclear weapons. And this is what the negotiations are all about. Because Iran has mastered the ability to enrich uranium so that it could be used in nuclear weapons, this is considered a threat to the United States' interest, and certainly it's a threat to Israel. And that's not going to be tolerated if there is going to be a deal.
Ross, Iran has offered more inspections but won't say it will cap enrichment. From a standpoint, do you think Trump will make this deal? Do you think that will be approved?
That's a really good question, because what you just asked still is inconsistent with the United States position. The United States position, as enunciated by negotiator Steve Witkoff, is that the United States will not tolerate Iran having any capability to enrich uranium, including for civilian nuclear power. So if Iran within the country is going to have a civilian nuclear power capability, the enrichment is going to have to be within the hands of some kind of international third-party consortium. And that's what maybe they're going to talk about and agree to, although it doesn't seem like they're not there yet. But again, it is the bottom line for the United States that Iran cannot have the ability to enrich uranium.
Ross, Israel is openly coordinating with Washington. We've seen Benjamin Netanyahu's statements on the talks. Could visible US-Israel alignment possibly push Iran away from these negotiations?
That's also quite an unknown at the moment. The reality is Israel has threatened to attack Iran's nuclear enrichment capability if there is no deal. And Israel's bottom line is even more clear than the United States. And Israel will not tolerate Iran maintaining a uranium enrichment capability, whether it's civilian or for military nuclear bomb purposes. And Israel has made that very clear. They have the military capability to reach Iran. They might not be able to fully destroy the facilities in an attack, but they could certainly do serious damage and set back Iran's nuclear capabilities. So Israel's position is also abundantly clear, and Iran needs to keep that in mind, because if Israel does attack Iran and is successful, it's going to be hugely embarrassing for the Iranian regime.
Ross, finally, President Trump has floated a 2-month deadline and he's threatened Iran with possible military action if diplomacy doesn't come through. Does that strengthen US leverage or box everyone in these negotiations, do you think?
That's also a really difficult question. The reason for that is no matter what the Trump administration says, there's still the Israel factor to consider. Even if the United States was to say they might use a military option, we know for a fact that Israel will use a military option. So Trump's threat, Iran might not take it seriously, but again, Iran has to take very seriously the threat that Israel would utilize a military option. Trump has been very reluctant to use military power overseas in his first term. They did assassinate the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's general, but that was really the exception, not the rule. So we can only speculate whether Trump in his second administration is willing to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities, but we know that Israel is willing to do that.
Ross Fineold, thank you very much for joining us on the programme and your insight. We now move on to South Asia, where a multi-party delegation led by Karni Karuna Nidhi landed in Moscow to begin a 5-nation tour on cross-border terrorism. at the Domodedovo International Airport. Ms. Karun Andi and members of her team were received by Indian Ambassador Vinay Kumar and other officials. The 8-member delegation includes SP MP Rajiv Rai, NC MP Mayan Altaf, and Mahmad BJP MP Captain Brijesh Chauta, and AAP MP Ashok Kumar Mittal. Also joining them is Ambassador Manjeev S. Puri and Ambassador Jawed Ashraf. The visit follows the Pahalgam terror attack on April the 22nd, which left 26 civilians dead. India responded with Operation Sindoor, a major military strike on terror camps. The team will meet Russian lawmakers and officials before travelling to Slovenia, Greece, Latvia and Spain. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi declared a new normal, saying any cross-border terror act would now be treated as an act of war. Meanwhile, Indian External Affairs Minister Subrahmanyam Jaishankar is visiting Germany, Denmark and the Netherlands, pushing India's zero-tolerance stand on terrorism. Let's listen in to what he had to say in his latest interview in Denmark.
Because again, when we look at big global challenges, I think I would put terrorism right up there as one of the key challenges. It affect the entire world. And we've had to grapple with a very serious terrorist attack in April. And what followed was a consequence of that, because the terrorists were based in a neighboring country and, you know, were operating with impunity and with a high degree of state protection and support. We had the conflict for a few days that you spoke about. Now, we resolved that conflict for the moment in its particular military form through agreement and understanding for a cessation of firing and military action. And this was something that we negotiated directly between the militaries of the two countries. The trigger for it was that after we had fighting for a few days, we hit them very hard on a particular morning, the morning of the 10th to be precise, and that caused the Pakistanis to say, okay, we're prepared to stop the firing and, reach an understanding about how to deal with it. So I just want to, get that part of it across to you.
He chaired a European Convoy conference in Berlin and said India will act if terror attacks continue from Pakistan. Operation Sindoor, launched on May the 7th, destroyed terror hubs in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, killing over 100 terrorists. India also damaged 11 Pakistani air bases, hitting radars, airstrips and communications. A ceasefire was announced on May the 10th, but tensions remain high. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has dubbed the operation a fierce expression of a capable India. We're now joined by Shruti Das Gupta, geopolitical expert located in New Delhi, to discuss this in more detail. Thank you very much for joining us, Shruti. Operation Sindoor has come to a close, but this world tour has just begun. What is India trying to achieve diplomatically that last month's airstrikes alone could not?
Well, let me just first issue a correction. Operation Sindoor is still underway. It has been there has been an understanding that has been reached. The ceasefire has not been launched. Basically, this entire hold on firing is Modi's way of saying that if Pakistan has any misadventures towards India, India will respond, and that will be the continuation of Operation Sindoor. So that is one particular point. What are we trying to achieve? So Pakistan, when it held international media delegations on its land and they held a press conference, they chose to cut out snippets and media bites and present as if this was an internal false flag operation that was kind of hosted on Pakistan as an accusation by India and the Indian ruling regime. So basically, now we've launched 7 delegations. It's a multi-party delegations. That means it is not just the ruling party and the ruling coalition. The opposition party and its members are also part of these delegations. In fact, some of them are leading. The one that you mentioned before, Kanimozhi Karunanidhi, happens to be a DMK MP, which is an opposition MP. to the India's current ruling party. They are leading because India stands as one, and they're going out there to correct the misconceptions that Pakistan might have created in the world through its very large and voluble media conferences to show that India was not holding false flag operations, it is holding Pakistan accountable for the terror that it kind of inflicts every now and then on India. So the delegations are meant to go there, present our proofs, present our point of view, and show to the world that Pakistan is not just an India problem, it is a world problem. It's a global terror hub, and the terrorists don't just attack India or its neighboring nations, but grow across the globe with it. So the delegations are to show India's point of view, why it will continue Operation Sindoor indefinitely till the time Pakistan mends its ways.
Shruti, how receptive do you think Russia and smaller EU states are likely to be, given their own stakes with Pakistan and mainly with China?
Well, I think Russia has always stood by us. We have a very long time. It's more than 22 years old, 23 years old agreement with it. In 2002, Russia and India had signed an agreement that they would be working together against terrorism. So with Russia, we have a very, very clear stand. They are our old-time friends, and we have military cooperations with them otherwise as well. So with Russia, we have no issues. The smaller nations, of course, will have to see where their cards fall. But any nation choosing to side with the Chinese dragon is having delusional dreams, because China does what China is best for China. Its debt traps, its economies, and the current fallout of its arming Pakistani state, and current news that are coming forth is that it also helped Pakistan during Operation Sindoor to help spot Indian military movement. So choosing China over Russia or India is going to be a folly of any European nation. So we expect a positive outcome, especially with the kind of proof that our delegations are carrying forward.
And finally, do you think, does sending an all-party delegation dilute partisan criticism at home, or possibly mixed messaging abroad? What do you think, Shruti?
It does not mix any messaging. In fact, it shows solidarity as a nation, that it doesn't matter whether you're a ruling party or the opposition party. This was an attack on India and its sovereign land, on its civilians. So every MP represents the people of India, is ready to go outside, step out of their comfort zones, collaborate with parties that are usually their opponents in political rallies, and showcase India in the best possible way. So it does not send mixed messaging at home and does not send mixed messaging outside. It does not dilute the message. In fact, it kind of strengthens and makes it more concrete that India stands as one against terrorism and its backers. So enough is the message that we're trying to send to the world, and we are showing it that it is not just Modi regime or the NDA that is wanting to hold this kind of a hard line. This is a nationwide statement, and that is what a multi-party delegations are supposed to present.
Shruti Das Gupta, thank you very much for joining us. That is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you.